right, welcome to another episode of Justice for Y'all. I'm Paul Painter, and with me, as always, is Andrew Bowen, Stephen Morrison, our firm Bowen Painter. Guys, how you doing?
Good. Good morning.
Good morning. This is our first one of the year. How was your Christmases?
Christmas was good. My family of four, my wife and two kids, went out to Park City, Utah for a week.
We shouldn't have started with Andrew.
Yeah.
Now we got to follow this.
Yeah, down from there.
But had a great time. Got some decent snow skiing in, and managed to miss most of the ski patrol strike, which is still going on out there. Our last day skiing was the first day of the strike, so at least in that regard, we timed it well.
Did it affect you at all?
Yeah, that last day was
Kind of shut it down.
Yeah, I mean, lifts were open, but not a lot of lifts, so everything, extreme lines just to get on the first lift, and then the limited slopes available, so it was really crowded. So we did about 2 runs and said this just isn't worth it.
Are they unionized?
They are.
Okay. All right. And it's just like a couple of companies that own the big resorts anyway.
Right. There are still independent ski resorts, but Vail Resorts is the one that owns Park City, and
Okay.
Vail, and quite a few others, and it's basically a hedge fund running the ski resorts. And
That is a good recipe for a strike.
yeah, there are issues that come with that.
Did you have any notable ski stories while you were out there?
Nothing too notable.
You got back out on the ski, just skis, snowboard?
Just skiing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never tried snowboarding. I figure I'm too old to learn a new sport.
That's not the attitude. That's it.
Well, I think your knees would agree with you.
Right. But just this past week, or earlier this week, I had to go to Steamboat, Colorado.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Where one of our clients lives for her deposition, and took a day to ski while I was out there. And you asked about notable ski stories, and ran into a group of 5 moose.
So there were 5.
There were 5 of them.
I just saw the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. The bull is the one I took the picture of
Yeah.
and sent to you guys with the huge antlers. But that was cool. I'd actually seen a moose on a ski slope before out in Jackson, Wyoming. But these guys they were sort of across a ravine, so they weren't anywhere close to being able to get near anyone. But they were just laying out on the slope in the sun, just enjoying themselves.
It was a bull and I assume
I think there were 2
female
bulls
moose?
and 3 females.
Okay. Is it a doe?
cow?
Cow. That's it.
Cow.
It's a cow.
Yeah.
Yep. I know.
And are they horns or antlers? Do moose lose
Moose
their...
or antlers, yeah.
Okay, they lose
What's
them.
the diff? Is there a difference there?
Horns you keep. The animal keeps their horns. Antlers they shed annually.
Man, you just learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Love it. My Christmas was not quite as exciting. I did travel, but I traveled to Arkansas where some of my wife's family is, and gathered. One just coincidental thing that was really nice. I got to meet up with a friend from when I practiced in Atlanta for a while. She and her family moved to Dallas, and for a long time, we've all known that we had family in this little town outside of Little Rock, and have talked about it. We finally made it happen. Got together at a brewery, at Lost 40, which is a Arkansas brewery out there, and hung out with them and their kids, and got to catch up and spend some time with family. It was really was a good trip.
Well, good.
Flew with the 11-month-old, which mercifully was not as bad as it could have been.
Millie's first Christmas.
Millie's first
That's
Christmas.
right.
It was
I'm sure she got no presents.
no, she was really neglected. Nobody paid attention to her. No, and per the kid, just fascinated with wrapping paper boxes and the noise, and then what she got is completely secondary. So we're looking forward to the first birthday. My understanding is that's mostly for the parents.
Correct.
So
Well, the smash cake is for the kid. That's
for the kid, but it's also for the parents.
That's right.
I mean, a sanctioned, pastry smashing event that I get to watch with this little cute kid. I'm here for it.
very good. Well, mine was nice. We didn't do any traveling, which was wonderful. Those who follow us on social media know I was flying back and forth to California several times in the month preceding the break for work, and it was nice just to be home for a while. Boys are 5 and 7, which is prime Santa years, and they were really excited. We went over to my mom's house for Christmas Eve dinner. Went to Mass, went to Christmas Eve dinner, and it ran a little late, and so we were driving home, and we got the app for Santa, and says
Tracking
how far
it.
away. Yeah, and he was in Charleston at that point, so he's getting close, and so the boys started freaking out, and we're driving home, and every radio beacon that has a flashing red light was Santa. It's like, there he is, there he is. I'm going to tell my friends we saw him.
Magical. I love it. I love it.
And he, now, and the last thing we did, and being so late, it was hard. One of our big traditions in our family is I'll read, and my dad did before me, night before Christmas, which is great. But the boys fortunately settled in for that and weren't too freaked out. I convinced them that Santa was still far enough away.
You get Nancy.
Yeah,
The one night a year they just can't wait to go to bed.
that's right. So anyway, it was good, and Santa was good to him.
Well, I'm sure he was. I can't believe Christmas is already a couple weeks ago. We're
Yeah, I know. We're
marching into the new year here.
2025, all ahead full. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I don't think lawyers talk about publicly very often.
You're tuned into the podcast where justice meets Southern hospitality. Broadcasting directly from Savannah, Georgia, join your hosts, Paul, Stephen, and Andrew of Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers as they chat about the legal difficulties you might face in everyday life. From the ports of Savannah to the busy highways that stretch through the Southeast, we're your go-to source for all things legal. Served up with a dose of Southern charm and commitment to justice for y'all.
And that is our hardest cases. And I'm not talking about necessarily our hardest legal arguments or things like that, but the ones that we took home with us, that weighed us down, and that were just, hard to do your job for an emotional sense, because, so many of the cases we have come through, especially these catastrophic injuries, really are heartbreaking stories. And over the years, when I was a young lawyer doing, plaintiff's work, it was really hard for me not to take it home and bring it on myself and say, and connect with the clients and feel like personally responsible. And I finally had to learn that, I imagine how doctors have to learn too. You got to leave it at home. You got to leave it, still be compassionate, still make it important, but you got to draw a line to where it doesn't ruin your life, because you deal with this stuff, these tragedies, day in and day out. And if you take it home and internalize it as your own, it can really negatively affect your mental health. And but you don't want to be so callous to where you don't care, obviously. So it's a fine
Hard balance.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. But there's certainly been some cases over the years that just couldn't find that separation, just couldn't do it. And they still, think about them to this day. And I know y'all have had the same experience. Anybody want to start off with some cases that resonate from over the years?
Yeah, I've got one that's top of mind for the simple fact that the mother involved in this case called us again last week. Her older son was involved in a serious wreck and was injured into December. But I had represented her previously, years ago. This was over a decade ago. And just a tragic case. And I do believe that in order to advocate for these clients, we have to be passionate about it. We have to believe in the case. And in order to convey it properly to a jury, ultimately, if you do have to try the case, you've got to have an emotional connection. Now, it can be hard to have that emotional connection and stand up there and make a cogent argument to the jury. But the passion and the sincerity is necessary. So it's a difficult thing for us to do. But onto the case. This was a case with a young family. It was a mother, and I think she had 3 children in the car. They were driving back from South Florida after Christmas. They'd been visiting family down there, grandparents. And they left really early in the morning to try to beat all the traffic back on I-95. They ended up getting in a wreck on I-95. And the car actually ended up against the guardrail, overturned on its side, but everybody was okay. And so then they were sort of on the center lane against the guardrail on I-95 in Brevard County, Florida. And we're in an unsafe place, and so they said, all right, we're going to try to get across the road. And several of them, managed to go across I-95, and the younger son, who was, I think he was 16 or 17 at the time, he was in high school, didn't make it across. Another car came through and ran over him and killed him in the highway right there in front of his family. And very tragic. And, talk about that emotional connection. This was just such a nice, wonderful family, such a great mother. And the kid, what really hit me is we, in preparation for mediation, we made a video. And this kid was very bright, very talented, very involved in the visual arts. So there were a lot of videos of him, speaking in his own voice. And
I remember that video.
yeah, it was just extremely impactful, and it affected me in a significant way then. And having talked to his mother last week, it kind of brought it all back. It's just a tragic case that has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
I mean, my plaintiff's representation is shorter in terms of my full-time career. I've had a couple of pro bono cases that were plaintiff side when I was on the defense side. The one, I mean, as a category, like it's easy to kind of find places in a lot of different cases where I felt a connection and just the difficulty of trying to convey what that person that I felt to other people, to the judge, getting it ready for a jury or bench trial. The ones that are most difficult, and the one that comes to mind to me immediately, are the ones where there's a real brokenness that started at the event you're litigating about. So whether it was an accident or abuse, and there's not a good remedy in the law for it, where you see there's a clear injury, but just for whatever reason, the law has not developed in that way, or perhaps some bad precedent has developed, or there's an intervening person or event that is outside of the control of the only person you can actually hold responsible, and they've got legitimate defenses to that, and trying to explain it to that hurt person. I represented a man who suffered from some serious mental illness and had been in and out of prisons and jail, and he had a long rap sheet. It was a pro bono case up in Minnesota. He had spent some time at this jail that we ended up suing years before and been in and out. He was a known player in the jail, like a frequent flyer, as they call him. And the abuse that he experienced there was directly because of his mental health. I mean, he had a real short fuse and inability to understand commands, particularly when he got into these heightened psychological conditions and these manic states. And the way that he was abused was over time. It was the death by 1,000 paper cuts was our theme for that, getting that case ready. Out the gate, it's already a hard case because it's a jail case. And add on top of that, it's a jail case with a guy who had been in the prison system, in and out of it before, had mental health issues, and had been really violent in the jail. I mean, he caused some significant destruction in the jail, flooded one of the levels by busting one of the sprinkler heads, and the guards knew him. They had no patience for him. It was very clear, deposing these people, that we know this guy. This is how he is. We have to do everything to protect the security of the jail. And you see the system just bent against this one guy, and every single person you talk to that worked there with him was just there to back the other officer up. It was, they call it the blue wall when you're deposing these people. You run into the blue wall and I'm not anti-police or anything like that, but in this case, it was just so clear that these people had no empathy for this person, no understanding. They were well aware. I mean, this is within the past decade that this happened. So it's not like this happened in the 80s and 90s when the cultural understanding of mental health was in a different place than it is now. I mean, now it's in the news, it's much more accepted. We're talking about it on a podcast. But despite knowing that, despite having training on it, they had no desire to understand where this behavior they were reacting to came from. Instead, all they knew was fight force with force. I mean, there's systemic problems on systemic problems, but those kind of cases where, one, there was no clear, it wasn't like they just ran him over with the truck one time.
Right.
It was like they just slowly went back and forth with this ever lowering blade and just really broke this guy over the course of 3 months. And trying to present that case in the context of the constitutional claims and all the immunities that we've talked about on the podcast, that's really challenging just from a legal perspective, but carrying the weight of how badly this guy was hurt. And we were the only ones that were going to take this case. No private lawyer was going to take this case on a fee because it's such a difficult case, because his client set up, having been in the system before, really diffuse or just sort of not injuries you can't put your hands on and understand. And you see, oh, well, he's had mental health problems before, he's got them now. What's the injury? When you heard his story, it was very clear that this period of time that he was in the jail here, waiting to be sentenced for some other thing, he was There was a dispute about whether he was there before trial or after, being convicted of stuff. Very complicated.
Right.
And all of that just mounted up to where he couldn't find a lawyer. There's a program in Minnesota that referred him to big firms like the one that I was working at. And I took the case. We litigated, and I had so much motivation to litigate that case like I was working for, the best company in America. Mm-hmm. And that was what a lot of our clients were. So that was really satisfying to be able to bring that representation there. But still, when I had my meetings with him, trying to explain to him, it was very clear to him that he was hurt and these guys messed up. I mean, that's a very simple story for him. And I think for ultimately it would have been a judge in this case because of the way it played out. But for the person who is going to make the ultimate decision, I think the story was there. But getting it from the point of bringing the case to the point where you have somebody reviewing this, that whole in-between part, explaining that to him, going through it, watching him just get beat back, his claims get shot down, dismissed by the defense counsel. We ended up going up to the Court of Appeals, and many of the claims got, dismissed at that stage, but it's still going, even though I left the firm. Last time I was in contact with the folks that took the case over, it's still going, but it's a very hard, complex, sad situation. Those kind of cases sit with me, and that's the one that just comes to mind immediately.
Right.
Well, that has the combination of the challenging legal situation of how do we find justice, but then you also, to be able to do that and tell the story and understand what really happened, you're required to have that level of empathy with your client to understand his condition, how it was affected, and to get down to that weeds. There's no way that I know of to understand that without empathizing and feeling the torture that he went through. So you've got to, to be able to explain it and to be able to put forth your legal claim, you've got to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a double whammy.
Yeah, it was a whammy. A whammy is a good way to put it.
I had one like that that was in a jail. It was a jail suicide. And this man who had some mental health problems was determined to kill himself. And he went to his preacher's house, and he had some notes on, like Post-it notes, and had a gun, and his preacher saw him and saw him holding the gun and called the police. And the police came, and by that point he was walking down the driveway, long driveway, and picked him up and ran his information, and he had a felony from 20 years earlier, something that was not a violent felony, but anyway, because of that, felon with a gun, they arrested him, took him to jail, never asked him about his mental health, never looked at these, looked at the notes, but didn't put any precautions in place, put him in a jail cell. He took
which were required by policy to do those things.
And he took off his socks and hanged himself in the jail cell, and there's video of it. And he just relived those last tortured hours of this man's life. And that's when we took to the Georgia Supreme Court and wound up losing it.
That's a whole different beating.
Well, that goes to mental health and the changing views on in Western society that haven't quite caught up with the law.
Right.
Even in what's considered more liberal states, we just dealt that with a case in California of how you can connect a suicide with the event that precipitated the suicide. But anyway, that's a different legal issue. But that had that same thing. But,
well, I will say, Paul, even though we lost that case, we got a favorable clarification of Georgia law in regards to the law on suicide. Mm-hmm. It didn't help us in this case, but it has helped other cases and other plaintiffs since then.
That's a good point.
And essentially, there was one line of cases that says, well, if somebody commits suicide, that's always the cause of their death. And so anything else that may have contributed to that.
Intervening, superseding cause.
Correct. Yeah. So, essentially under that line of cases, any suicide case was a dead end. But there was another, not necessarily line of cases, but another couple cases that made a distinction for suicide in a custodial type situation, whether it's in a hospital or in a jail. And the Supreme Court affirmed that part and said, when there's a special relationship where the person in custody has a duty to prevent the suicide, there is a viable claim there.
Yeah.
And so while we lost this case on some other facts having to do with ministerial versus discretionary duty, that was a positive outcome in the case for the state of the law in Georgia.
That's a good point.
And I mean, that goes to, Paul, what does it look like to find justice in a case? And the simple thing that, and we preach this part of our sort of our mission is money justice, and that's a real thing. There are only so many ways to hold people accountable, to compensate, to try to rebalance a scale that can never truly be brought back. I mean, money that's what goes on the civil side, but justice does look differently in some cases. Sometimes it comes with money. Sometimes it comes with policy changes. Sometimes it comes with advancements or at least clarifications of the law, because when you clarify a law, if it comes out one way and it's bad for a group of people, that is the end of that case, but it's not the end of that issue. I mean, that issue is now in our government ripe for a political decision. And you can now bring this and say, hey, the courts, you see this happen a lot. Courts make a decision, say the law, here's the outcome. And folks can look at that and say, you know what, I don't like that outcome. How can we fix it? Can't go back to the court. The case is over, but you can go to your elected official. And that's a really important thing that people need to realize and understand about their power to go and find justice for that issue, even though maybe in a particular case it's
that's true, because before that the law and there's still part of the law in Georgia was the only way you could recover is if the person, you hurt somebody and then that injury immediately caused them into what's called a rage and fury, as I recall the language, a rage and frenzy, and then they committed suicide. And it's like that is such a not what suicide is, and a lack of understanding of mental health, but the position that maybe was the understanding of mental health in the 50s when that case came out, or 60s, whenever it was.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I thought that was a Faulkner book you were quoting.
The hardest case, the hardest cases I have are more in line with what Andrew said, though. It's with children, and I've had 2 cases that involve the sexual assault of children. That if I never have another case like that, it'll be too soon.
This is probably a good time if there are parents listening. Maybe.
Yeah. This is. We won't go into great detail, but it's really disturbing.
Just a warning, you make your own decision.
Right. But that's a good point. And one of them was with a young teenage girl who was on a trip with her friends, with her friend's family, and then one of the cousins who was early 20s drugged her and raped her at the holiday, and had gotten her drunk and then kind of slipped her a Mickey, and she woke up with him, And that was tough. And she was a strong and smart young woman, and you could see her using that strength to get past this. But I worried so much for her that she was putting up walls emotionally to not trust people by being strong, and that's one of the many things that is the aftermath of that kind of assault, is the trust and the view of the world and how somebody changes to adapt and deal with it. And but I think about her, and I wonder how she's doing, because she'd be probably in college now or close. The other one was even worse, and it was a young boy who was I forget 8 or 9, I think, and he was on a school bus with a small group of boys. I think there were only 2 others, but one of them was like 17. And the 17-year-old raped him on the bus, where there was a bus driver and a monitor on the bus with 3 kids. And this happens. And with that one, the assailant was charged, obviously, with a crime. Well, not obviously, but he was charged with a crime.
I wish it was obviously.
Yeah. But it was in juvenile court, and they had my client there as a witness, and went to court with him. And fortunately, in juvenile court, they have like rooms where you can look in on the courtroom with two-way mirror, so you can't see the witness until the witness is called. And his family was there, and I was there, but he saw the assailant, and he just got so upset, and you could just tell he couldn't process it or deal with it, and we didn't have the emotional maturity to be able to do that. And it was, I don't know, I remember that day so clearly, and I never want another day like that. And I just, just hate it for that boy. I mean, we've had to go to children's hospitals, to meet with families, and that's just that's my least favorite days of it. So
anything having to do with a tragedy with a child, I think just as humans, that affects us greatly. It's interesting, the cases that are just sad are extremely hard for us.
Yeah.
This sounds, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but I will say it helps when we actually have someone to go after for it. So let's take the car wreck that I was talking about with a young guy that was run over in the highway. Very tragic accident, and there was negligence on the part of the driver that hit him. But it's also, this guy's driving down the interstate at 3-something in the morning. He's just suddenly confronted. It's hard to get too angry about that.
Yeah, it was an accident.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day,
in
it
the
might have been
truest
negligent,
sense.
but it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't like he was doing anything.
But when there's a bad actor, so to speak, it sort of helps you put aside just the straight pure sadness of it and say, all right, I know where justice lies, and I'm going to go after it.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of why we do what we
we're
do
all here.
Yeah.
Now there is those cases that are, you stay up later, you work longer, you because an injustice was done. There's a terrible story. There's a loss that'll never be totally righted, and it could have been prevented if somebody hadn't been, intentional or cavalier with things. And we've got a case that we're taking to trial for too long, and I won't get into the facts there since it's a pending case. But it's disgusting what we're seeing, and we're just like
The disregard for life.
disregard for human safety and life, and the it's that's the type of thing I think that gets us going. I hate bullies. I think I look at these people as bullies,
Yeah.
and it's like that makes it easy to get fired up and work on those cases.
Yeah,
so
I think anytime anyone takes advantage of someone else when they're vulnerable, I mean, it's especially disgusting.
Yeah.
Child, the mentally ill, those just with the massive imbalance of power.
Right.
right.
And also the refusal, which we see quite often, the refusal to accept responsibility.
Doubling down sometimes.
Yeah.
Or
It's-
blaming the person that got hurt.
Yeah, that is disgusting. It's just, and I know it's a certain amount of human nature, but it's not the good side.
Right. But
Yeah.
but those sorts of things sort of stoke the fire with us,
Yeah.
and make us doubly interested in making sure justice is done.
So I imagine some lawyers listen to this and go through the same thing. Let me ask you all, when you have a case like that and you can't leave it at the office, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with your own mental health and trying to handle a case like that, do it with excellence, do it the way that we try to do it, but then go home and be, fathers and husbands and, members of the community without bringing that weight home in a way that is harmful to you or those around you. How do y'all deal with that? Or, how do you try to deal with that?
Yeah.
That's a better way to ask it.
Don't think we cornered the market on that solution.
Yeah.
So just internalize it, lock it away, and drink a lot, right?
Right, yeah,
that's pretty much the.
I think that's what they taught you in law school.
That seems to be the
It's
historic
classes
way,
a while
yeah.
ago, but jokes.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a set method or way that I deal with it. There are times, they're rare, but there are times when I come home and I'll just tell my wife, it's like, hey, this was a bad day. I don't feel like talking, and generally that's fine. But for the most part, sometimes it does help to talk to her about it. I don't really talk about those things with my kids too much. 'Cause I don't want to expose them to such tragedy and suffering. But generally, I think making a concerted effort to not lock it away, internalize it, but to say, okay, I'm taking that and I'm leaving that at work, and I'm going to enjoy being with my kids or enjoy being with the family. I think it's just a mental recognition that is work and this is family.
Yeah.
But there are times when I'm affected by what we do, and I don't know that it's ever affected my family negatively, but it's meant that I needed some space.
Sure.
And so don't be afraid to take that space,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons we have lawyers involved is for that space, because if it was just the people who got hurt trying to figure this out, I don't know how they would find the space. I mean, it's hard enough for those of us just coming in on a cold, maybe a warm set of facts, but we were not involved in the accident. To be there, that's an important part of the structure. Like Andrew, for me personally, I don't have like a routine when it's hard. It's just kind of trying to maintain a baseline of good mental health and physical health. Physical health is important. Finding time to be outside, to break away, to exercise. I married a lawyer. For me personally, that has been a big help in that department. She also does claimant side work now, so we were able to talk about kind of some of the same things, and she understands the work. That helps me. And then I have at times in my life done therapy, and more often than not, it's not non-work issues that I've needed more help with than work issues. But those things all get tangled up together, and so that's a really important outlet.
Yeah, I agree, and I've done therapy too. I think it's a great resource for anybody, but as lawyers are typically known to have some of the lowest levels of mental health, and so we need all the resources we can get, and I kind of the same thing that y'all talk about. I've sort of developed, my problem has always been that if I got something like that, I'll internalize it, I won't let myself feel it, and then I'll try to control it. And so I will put more work into it and think that I'm going to be able to get the answer, and then that I can lawyer my way through this problem that over the years, what I've tried to come to do, and using various techniques. I agree with exercise. I do some meditation to try to get centered so I can think like this, or journaling or whatever. But it's remembering that we can only control what we can control, and there's a certain amount of acceptance. And sometimes the way to be there for the clients is just to be present for them, not be their lawyer and try to fix it.
Absolutely.
And then, and in that same vein, we're all, Christian, and I've learned that if I can, I pray for our clients, especially the ones that, stay in my mind a lot, to try to give the peace that we're not going to be able to give. Only God can give that peace in our view of spirituality and religion. So I, let go and try to unload it that way. So, and a lot of that is over the years. All those techniques I'm getting better at it, I'd say.
Right.
But it's still tough. I mean, it's and in a way, I'm glad it's tough. There have been times where I put up a wall and didn't feel it, and that's not good.
Right.
For both for me and for what we're trying to do for
on
our
a different
clients.
thing when that
That's
happens.
right. So it's trying to find that line of it's okay to feel, but you got to unload it from your own shoulders and figure out how to do that.
Well,
and then realize some days you can't do it. We're human.
Right.
And some days we're not going to be our best selves with that.
Practicing with others, throw that out there.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't do this as a solo. I've learned, I'm pretty confident of that at this point. I mean, having you guys to talk through with our paralegals and staff, I mean, that is really, really, really important to share that. Open it up, get it out there, hear that, have it validated by having somebody else share that experience. And I think more broadly, the faith community too. I mean, obviously not going to go talk to a priest about a case, but just kind of, opening up about stress, participating in that. And our clients come from different religious backgrounds. We often find commonality in the acceptance of there is a limited role for this, what we're doing here. We have a limited access to justice. We don't get ultimate justice. And I found a lot of connection and bond and place for conversation with clients about that, even if they don't share my particular spirituality.
Right. Well, this has been sort of a heavy episode.
It has been.
What you got for us?
Let's sign off with something a little lighter.
Let's
all right?
do it. I think that's a great idea.
Why do cows need bells?
Why?
Because their horns don't work.
But the horns don't fall off.
That's right. They don't
Learn that.
All right. Well, that is all for another episode of Justice for Y'all. We'll see you next time.
Click a clack.
Okay.
Don't talk back.
No. It's close.
Thanks for listening to Justice for Y'all, hosted by the attorneys here at Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers in Savannah, Georgia. If today's episode resonated with you, or if you find yourself needing legal guidance, remember, we're just a call away. You don't have to work through the difficulties of your situation alone. Visit our website at bowenpainter.com, that's BOWENPAINTER.com, or give us a call at 912-335-1909. We're here to serve you with the dedication and warmth only true Southern hospitality can offer. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss an episode. And tell your friends and family about us if they're ever in need of some legal insight. Take care, and remember that at Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers, we're committed to justice for y'all.